Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到北美韭菜日记，我是九九。这周整体来说呢，股市币圈行情走的都还算不错。上周我们4个人在直播的时候还特意讨论了这个话题，说会不会在大家都已经心灰意冷的时候，这个 Santa Rally 就来了，圣诞老公公会不会趁大家不注意来一波偷袭？标普500已经基本重回新高了，纳斯达克一周反弹了 5.1%。代表创新科技股的 ARKK 从最低点反弹了 10%， 特斯拉更是在老马卖股票接近尾声这个消息的刺激之下，直接是反弹了 20%。 然后币圈这边今天也刚刚开始启动，比特币重新站上了5万，以太坊在录视频的时候也已经是4100了，各种其他的山寨币涨得更凶。先不讨论今年一整年大家账户都是一个什么情况，起码这周的股市币市这么给力，还是能让大家过一个不错的平安夜的。明天晚上也是该吃吃该喝喝，都别亏待了自己了。今天这期视频主要是想快速的和大家一起看一下 Tom Lee 这周在 CNBC 接受的采访，对明年股市整体行情做一个展望，同时也会透露他明年最看好以及最不看好的几个板块。Tom Lee 应该也称得上是今年华尔街最靓的仔了，今年的几次预测还都是挺准确的，尤其是在年初的时候大力看多了能源股和银行股，这两个板块也是今年年初至今表现最好的板块，都是大幅跑赢了大盘的。虽然长期来说呢，我个人是非常不看好这两个行业的前景的，但是也不得不佩服 Tom Lee 大哥对板块轮动精准的把握，所以隔一阵子呢，我就喜欢听一听这位大哥的采访，之前的视频也 cover 过几次，整体来说还是比较具有参考价值的。OK， 那么咱们废话也不多说，一起来看采访。
Fundstrat is out with its 2022 market outlook. The forecast calls for new highs, but it may not be smooth sailing, and they may not come right away. Let's bring in Fast Money friend Tom Lee. Tom's a managing partner of Fundstrat and a CNBC contributor. Tom, always good to see you. Ultimately, you're calling for a pretty good year next year, 11% or so, but all the gains are going to be in the back half. What happens in the first half?
I think the market's going to struggle with a lot of things you guys just talked about in the first half. You know, it's the supply chain glitches and the way it affects both GDP growth and perceptions of inflation. And we've got the midterm elections that really won't have any visibility until the second half. We've got the Fed tightening, and that liftoff might occur at the end of the first half. But in front of that, markets are going to be nervous. And we, of course, have COVID and the various variants and mutations kind of rolling through both the U.S. and the rest of the world. So I think in the first half, it would make sense for markets to be flat or down. But the second half, I think we end up having pretty much a traditional bull market rally.
总结一下以上所说的， Tom Lee 对于2022年美股整体走势依旧是保持看多，标普年终目标价他给的是5100点，距离今天收盘价大概还有 8% 的上升空间。今年年初的时候，他对2021年标普年终目标价是4600点，8月的时候基本上是已经要达到了，然后他就又把目标价上调到4800点了。今天收盘价是4725点，也是非常接近他给的目标价。不过如果是长期关注了 Tom Lee 的观众朋友们应该也知道，这位大哥是美股非常坚定的大多头，之前曾经放话说美股大牛市会持续到2038年，背后的逻辑是因为他觉得美国的经济和人口结构有着非常重要的关系。现在美国的千禧一代是继战后婴儿潮之后人口数量最多，同时又是最富有的一代人，这代人的人口红利是可以一直持续到2038年的，所以他认为在这期间美国股市也会跟随着这个趋势一路高歌猛进。虽然 Tom Lee 自己投资的大多都是传统股，但是非常有意思的一点是他同时又是加密货币的大多头。看多加密货币最底层的逻辑也是刚才所说的，美国年轻人就是喜欢币圈多于股市，觉得股市都是老一代人玩剩下的，币圈才是年轻人们的世界。同时这代人大多也都见证了08-09年的金融危机，亲眼看到了自己父母一辈积累了一辈子的财富是如何被华尔街掠夺一空的，所以对于加密货币这个号称要颠覆传统金融机构的这个概念本身就比较有好感。虽然说 Tom Lee 对于明年整体行情是看多的，但是也说了主要涨幅他认为会来自下半年，因为上半年里存在的不确定性因素还是太多，美联储开始收紧货币政策，经济增速有可能放缓，中期选举等等，所以总的来说呢是风险大于潜在收益的。我个人其实也是持类似的观点，虽然说最近一周股市币市反弹整体都还算不错，但是我觉得大家也不应该掉以轻心，尤其是对于风险资产包括中小盘的科技股以及加密货币，只要是 taper 这个悬在头上的大锤没有完全落下，可能都很难看到像去年的那种疯涨行情了。OK， 继续来看采访。
Hey, Tom, it's Tim. How about the stocks? And we've talked about this on the show where we've made mention of below the surface. There's a lot of stocks that have been in heavy bear markets, so beyond correction. Are these stocks that can recover faster in that choppy first half you're talking about? So some of the high multiple tech names, but not necessarily even that, even some of the industrial names. Again, parts of the market that are down 20, 30, 45% off of 52-week highs.
Yeah, Tim, I mean, I think there's going to be some relief in January because, Omicron came in and, in just a matter of 2 weeks went from essentially 0% of cases to 73%. And as you know, in South Africa, it burned out after 25 days. So I think we're going to be sort of relieved when that happens. And it should help a lot of stocks that got annihilated over the past couple of weeks on the heels of that. But will those names bounce and hold their gains through the end of 2022? I don't know. I mean, my guess would be first half of 2022 will be very defensive, large cap and defensive.
划重点，这里 Tom 认为风险资产的反弹可能会持续到1月，因为现在股市里还有一个潜在风险，就是 Omicron 变种。美国发现第一例 Omicron 是在12月1号，所以如果以南非的数据作为参考的话，这波感染到达峰值就差不多是在发现第25天的时候，也就是12月底。如果美国的感染人数出现拐点，开始走下坡的话，那这个利空消息也是会被市场消化掉，资金是有可能短暂的开启一波 risk on 模式的。这个也算是一个比较大胆的 statement 了，因为1月马上就要来了，咱们也是可以看看整个1月会不会出现一轮中小盘科技股的反弹行情。如果真的再次被他说中的话，那是不是可以考虑他公司里付费的市场调研报告订阅一波？开个玩笑哈，我之前的确是有过这个想法，但是看了价钱之后呢，也是果断直接被劝退了。OK， 继续来看采访。
Hey, Tom, it's Jeff Mills. I had a quick question. I think your view is that inflation trends a little bit lower next year. I was just wondering what you thought about the impact on commodity prices and then ultimately what that means for the energy sector. I know that you're pretty positive on energy going into next year.
Yeah, energy is one of our top 3 groups. That's because there's a structural shortage of oil, production versus demand. But I think a lot of the inflation we're seeing in 2021 is goods related. 5 of the 6 categories contributing to inflation growth are things like used cars, autos, apparel, home furnishing. Just those 5 are 2 percentage points of inflation this year. So I think that's what sort of weakens. It's not necessarily commodity prices because commodities end up being inputs onto that. But, I think oil prices actually are going to distinguish themselves and probably rise, actually.
Tom, amazing work as always. So a couple of these resource names are getting off the mat at a very interesting time in terms of everything we've just talked about. What does that tell you? I'm not looking to play stock market here, but the resource trades to me significant. Talk about this global growth dynamic. Does that make sense? Are these stocks telling us something?
Basic material stocks only can rise when they sort of sniff better growth. I do think it's encouraging. I mean, I would say one of the surprises in the last couple of days has been the rally in things that are heavily impacted by both economic sensitivity and by COVID. And, maybe the market is already starting to bottom and discounting the fact that Omicron's going to peak soon. But if it is, there'll be a lot of relief because, if you don't have a big rise in mortality, COVID is becoming less dangerous. I mean, I think that could be one of the positives that emerge from this.
We know you like energy, as you mentioned, for next year, Tom. You liked it last year, and that was an epic call. Energy, the top performing sector year to date. And so you're saying in this new note that healthcare is positioned the same way energy is, which would imply a huge rally in next year. What sets up for that?
We were looking at relative performance, and energy's relative performance argument last year was that the 10-year stretch into 2021 was one of the worst ever. In fact, we kind of joked that you have to go back to like the whale oil days to find a worse time to own energy stocks. And so energy equities became orphans, but the fundamentals were better. And we saw that in 2021. Healthcare has a similar setup, that these groups had a huge derating of their PE, but earnings growth has actually been, pretty impressive, and they are somewhat inflation resistant. So I think that there's a potential for their earnings to recover and PE to expand, and that would look a lot like energy in 2021. And, possibly, I mean, I think FANG has the same setup. So I think, FANG and healthcare could have one of those 20-30% kind of years.
总结一下，2022年 Tom Lee 最看好的3个板块，能源主要还是石油股、大科技以及医疗股。大科技和能源股今年都是大幅跑赢大盘的，但是整个医疗板块今年是小幅跑输了大盘。他觉得现在医疗股的处境和去年同一时间内的能源股很相似，有着不错的基本面，但是一直都不是很受市场的青睐。同时，医疗行业相对来说也不会受到通货膨胀太严重的影响，所以现在这个阶段属于一个进可攻退可守的板块。不过这里也要注意，他所说的医疗板块指的应该是那些已经盈利了的传统医疗公司，而不是像 ARKG 里面的这些还处于烧钱阶段的公司。如果对这个板块不是很有研究，但是又想要布局的朋友们，我觉得直接去买 XLV 这个 ETF 就好了。OK， 那今天的视频差不多就先带来到这里了。如果觉得对你有些帮助的话，千万不要忘记点赞、订阅这个频道。也提前祝大家明天都能和家人一起度过一个美好的平安夜，咱们吃饱喝足，明年再在股市里赚大钱。我们下期视频再见，拜了个拜。